Hiya fellow nerds! Today I have some really exciting news. So currently I have 12 games that are launched across a bunch of platforms. I have 3 unique games that are spread across Steam, Xbox, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and Atari VCS. But today I add a 13th, dang it. Today I add a 13th game to that list. And it is maybe the most exciting one yet. As of the publication of this video, my game Bridges and Docks is now officially available on the Nintendo Switch eShop. It's only $5, so if you want to build some islands on the go, it would really mean a lot to me if you would support this game's launch. But getting the game on the Nintendo Switch was not an easy path, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Because from the very beginning, I wanted to make games primarily for this Nintendo platform. Because I want to get the games that I make into the hands of people that I know personally. And most gamers that I'm friends with own a Nintendo Switch. And a lot of them also own Xboxes and play games on Steam. But now that I think about it, I actually don't know anybody that owns a PlayStation or an Atari VCS. So let me know down in the comments which console platform is the best and which one is for whiny babies. Honestly, please don't, because you all have done an amazing job of keeping the comment section on my videos very respectful, and I appreciate that. Anyway, I wanted to get my game on Nintendo Switch for a couple of reasons. One, because I wanted to show off the games that I'm making to people that I know. Which is a lot more doable with a Nintendo Switch. You can't really lug around your Xbox to places and show people the game that you've made. The second reason is that I think that the games that I'm making have a style that is most at home on Nintendo consoles. As I continue to make games, I'm realizing that I have a certain style that I'm trying to hit, and that seems to most align with Nintendo's brand. So it's exciting for me to finally get a game on there. And then there's reason number 3 for wanting to launch a game on the Switch, and that's that I'm basically a human version of Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob, a greedy bastard who only cares about the bottom line. But that's just how it goes while you're trying to raise a family in this capitalistic hellscape, am I right? Nah, I'm just kidding. The free market is a great thing, am I right? Go ahead and leave a comment below about how you feel about capitalism. Okay, so here's the story about how I got my game on Nintendo Switch. I assume that most of you are pretty familiar with my journey thus far. I quit my full-time job, and then I started applying to all of these different developer programs so that I could get access to console dev kits, and I got accepted into every single one except for Nintendo. Which kinda sucks, you know? And I know lots of other indie developers that can't get onto the Nintendo platform either. Which doesn't really make a lot of sense, because if you go onto the Nintendo eShop, you can see that there's a lot of garbage in there. Lots of explicit games and shovelware, so why can't more credible games get onto the platform? Well, I think it's actually because of the shovelware that's on the eShop that Nintendo has kind of put a wall up, and it's really hard as an indie developer to get over that wall. From what I've heard, it's a lot easier to get onto the Switch if you have a publisher, or if your game is like really good. Luckily for me, I used my God-given ability to network with people to get on the platform. Basically, I just asked around my friends and network to see if anybody had a contact at Nintendo that I could talk to face to face. And someone put me in contact with a point person at Nintendo, and I shot them a message, they re-reviewed my application, and I was off to the races. And I have to tell you, one of the best things about this whole indie developer journey is getting console dev kits in the mail. It's super exciting every time. Each platform does stuff differently, but it's really cool getting this big box in the mail and you open it up and it's filled with this secret novel piece of hardware that only a limited amount of people have access to. So I was really excited to get the dev kit in the mail, but I actually had to shelve it for a while because I was trying to wrap up a couple of other console ports and projects that I had to finish before I could turn my attention to the Nintendo Switch. And for those who aren't familiar, the porting process has basically 5 major steps to it. The first step is to get access to the platform's backends. This includes dev kits, contracts, support forums, documentation, all of that kind of stuff. The second step is ordering and then setting up the actual hardware, which is typically pretty straightforward. You plug it in and you run some updates, get the patches for the latest dev kit firmware. That's the term, firmware. But some platforms require a VPN, and so I had to do some sort of networking magic to get my console to connect. The third step is reading the documentation, and boy, this one is a doozy. Everything is fun up until step 3, but it basically feels like you're doing underwater cave spelunking. I don't think I've ever had more internet tabs open at one time than I have when trying to read through documentation to port a game to consoles. Now, you programming nerds will probably get this, but I basically had to decide whether I wanted to do a breadth first search or a depth first search. A depth first search basically means you run down the rabbit hole and you click specific links until you hit a dead end, and then you come back for air and do the next one. And a breadth first search kind of means getting an awareness of all of the top level topics first. And that's usually the process that I opt for. It's easier to take in information once you kind of have the different boxes of, oh, this is where this kind of lives, and I know where I can go if I need it later. So then I can concentrate on the stuff that I care about at the moment, like how to set up a dev kit, and then I can leave other stuff to later, like how to receive payments or how to track sales, stuff like that. And to be honest, you never really stop doing step 3. I'm constantly going back to the documentation at every single step of the process. But it's at this phase where I really get a grasp of the documentation as a whole and kind of read as much as I can so that I can ensure that I have all of the information that I need to get done what needs to get done. And for what it's worth, Nintendo has fantastic documentation. It's probably the best docs that I've seen so far, but I'm not sure if that's because I'm getting better at porting to consoles and I have a better awareness of how porting works in general, because it seems like every subsequent console that I'm porting my games to seems easier and easier. So I don't know if that's because I started with the hardest or if I'm just getting better at it. Maybe a little of both. Okay, so when I'm reading through the documentation, I basically want an output of a to-do list. And so as I'm going, I make a list and I say, okay, I can't forget to do this. I need to do this and this and this. And I basically have this outputted list and I'm like, okay, this is what I need to get my game launched. Then I move on to step 4, which is what most people think of when they think of porting a game to consoles. It's modifying your game project so that you can create a build that can run on the specific hardware. And to be honest, this is typically the easiest part of the whole process for me. Unity makes it really easy to basically run on any platform. Yes, there are tweaks that you need to make here and there, but overall I think it's fairly simple. The big items are things like startup procedures and how you save your data and in-game achievements, things like that. Startup procedures are like what native platform systems need to be initialized when you start the game, logging into a player's account or fetching their save data, stuff like that. And then each individual platform has their own way of saving player data, so you need to customize that as well. And then of course, adding achievements. And adding achievements for the different platforms is pretty simple across the board. And what makes a lot of this stuff a lot easier is that most platforms have code snippets that you can just take and modify and plant it into your project. Like, how do you unlock achievements? Oh, you just take this one line of code, spit it into your project, give it the right ID, and then it'll unlock that achievement for you. This is getting boring. Is this boring? Let me know down in the comments if you think this is boring. That's why I was saying all of this. Now, I say all this to highlight that typically the export process of a build for a specific type of hardware is usually very straightforward. But that was not the case for the Nintendo Switch. And that's because of one very important aspect of the Nintendo Switch: the hardware limitations. You see, the Switch is basically a glorified smartphone, which means that it can't handle intensive computations like other platforms can. And because of this, I had to spend a lot of time optimizing bridges and docks. And I mostly concentrated on rendering because that's what was killing the frame rate. And in this process, I learned a ton of different optimization techniques in Unity. I ran a lot of different comparisons that tested things like static batching versus GPU instancing versus SRP batching. It's a whole world that I was pretty unfamiliar with. I had to break out the old Unity profiler to see what was bogging down the frame rate, and I added a bunch of debug tools to my game so that I could toggle stuff on and off and see what was causing all of the frame rate dips. In the end, though, I was able to lock in a solid frame rate for the game, even when maxing out the island generation limitations. But that's what's cool about game development, is that I'm always learning something new. And I feel like I'm constantly adding different tools to my tool belt. Okay, so that was all step 4, and now we can move on to step 5, which is the last step in the process, and it's also not a fun one. It's setting up the store page for publication. Across every platform, this involves uploading your build, adding localized store listings, setting up a rating for your game, setting up the price for each individual country and region where you're going to list it for sale, providing screenshots and trailers, and all of that stuff. And so for each platform, when you upload a build of the game, it runs through their own QA process to make sure that the game runs appropriately. And boy, let me tell you, Nintendo has a fantastic QA team. They caught some bugs that I had never seen before. Needless to say, I actually failed the submission process multiple times. But me and my team eventually figured it out. My team being me, myself, and I. So anyway, maybe that's more information than you wanted about the porting process. But porting to Switch has been an amazing little adventure, and I'm excited to get it into all of your hands so that you can play bridges and docks on the go. I finally completed my little bingo sheet of launching a game on each major platform, which feels really good. At least, I hope it's going to feel good, because the game hasn't launched as of this recording, but when I press publish on this video, then the game should be live as well. And if there's some sort of game-breaking catastrophic bug on the Switch build when it goes live, then that's not going to be a good time. But I'm fairly confident that that won't happen. So go check out Bridges and Docks on the Nintendo Switch, and I'll see y'all in the next one.